we go. Right, so we're going to get started this evening. Won't be too long this evening, I'd say. Just want to wrap up the tools side of things and talk about the second assignment primarily. So we shouldn't be that long this evening. Should be fairly straightforward. So before I get into the second assignment, which starts tonight. First of all, I contacted the college last week after our session here in relation to revising the session times and whatever, and they're quite happy to let me run it whichever way we go or whichever way we've agreed. So what we decided, what we planned last week, continue all the way through with a pre-recorded session for the last session, which was actually technically is Easter Monday. That's what's going to happen. So you'll be finishing the module 2 weeks early. You don't have exams in this module, so you'll basically, what I'm giving you tonight is the final part of the assessment. You've got one, which is due, and then you'll have the second one, which I'm giving you tonight, and we'll take some time talking about it. But once you have that done, module is finished. Okay, there's no exam or any that sort of a situation, so it makes it much more straightforward for organization and for running it like that. The deadline for the assignment, as I'll show you in a few minutes, is still staying the same. It's still staying for the 24th of April, which gives you 2 weeks after the actual official when we're closing the module to complete it. But if you want to get it done early, no reason why you can't get it done out of the way before Easter, and you're completely clear then for of this module. Before I do, we've all been asked, you're going to hear this across the week or whatever classes you've got. You may have heard it last week. It's just that today they issued out a whole image that they want us to include. So I'm basically putting it up at the very start of all my sessions this week, just to inform people of it. And that is the student survey. And they're asking us that we point it out. It's all first years and final years. It's all for undergrad programs. It's all first years and final years. For postgrad, it's everybody across the board. So there's a QR code on this that people can use. It is designed basically. We're looking for people. It's anonymous. The college every year puts a big emphasis on getting people to complete this. It's completely anonymous. There's a load of colleges around the country get involved in this. And I know, as I say, every year we get the same thing from the college. Thanks very much, kind of really. Your check will be in the post. Appreciate that. But basically, thankfully, it's nothing to do with me. This is, I actually, as a student, I didn't even know what this was. It's very something that came out after, but it's, yeah, that's that's what I'm thinking, Louise. People get very nice until they see the results, and then all of a sudden, the attitude changes. So basically, the encouragement is that we get everybody. Some classes, some lecturers along and give time to do it. Well, I at this stage, Mike, I'll just take straight Bitcoin transfers will do fine, rather than much better. That it's much less traceable. Oh well, in that case, forget about it. I'll just take hard cash, Mike. It's the easier way. Can't beat the cash. All that, the value of that goes down as well. So look, we're encouraged. We're asked to encourage everybody to complete it. So I'm doing what we've been asked to do. You are probably going to hear it from every lecturer this week that you have. I'm not sure that I'll give the QR code. It's there. It's not in the presentation that is up with the lecture presentations. It's not on that. This image only came out today. I was away today. I was in St. Luke's Hospital most of today, and we just got home. And I was checking emails and saw this, so I said I'd better stick it into this material, and it's there for people who want to do it. We're encouraging to get people to do it. Yeah, that's a bit I'm not sure, Garrett. I'm not sure if you put any identifiers in, if you put your student number into it, well, then it's not an anonymous survey, but we've been told it is anonymous. I think if you want to be considered for one of the prizes, you have to put your name in, your details in. But if you just want to complete the survey, you can complete the survey. That's kind of the way these things normally work. If you want to be in for the draw, you have to put some identifier in. But if you just want to complete the draw or complete the process, you can just complete the process, I think. The lifelong learning guys might drop into some classes. Now, they told me last week they'd be dropping into classes, and they didn't come near any of the classes I was lecturing in. So even the ones I was doing on site on Thursday afternoon, they didn't come anywhere near me. It's I don't know. It's basically giving you guys a chance to put your opinion across, give some feedback on the college, on the process. I think this year they're particularly interested in the fact that it's the first year where it'll be done as SDTU rather than IT Carlow. So they may be just interested to see what people's views on the transition or something like that. Okay, so it's not an anonymous survey, even though that's what they say it is. But apparently thanks, Mark. Even though we're told it's anonymous. Well, there's always a catch. The thing is, though, it all gets lumped into the national survey. So yeah, that's the key thing, Mike. You have to have if you want to be in with the prize, you're going to have to put your details in. But if Mark is saying you can't do the survey unless you put your details in, well, then that does not make an anonymous survey. Then it can be traced. Your response can be traced back. I haven't heard of anybody having any adverse situation. There's no ramifications for being honest in the process. No one gets challenged about it. But look, it's there. I'm doing my bit. I'm telling people of it. I'm not going to be standing over people with a shotgun. I know there was a recommendation which I am personally not going to be involved in. There is a suggestion that we should give time in classes to allow people to do it. But for me, that's forcing someone to do something that they may not want to do, which in itself takes away the whole concept of voluntary contribution to the process. So I'm not going to take time to say to people, right now, we're all going to stop for the next 10 minutes while you complete that survey. I'm telling you it's there. There's links to stuff all over Student Hub about it on Blackboard. And if you can't find it there, I think it's on the website. And if you can't find it there, just come into the recording of this, which will be up probably on Wednesday. Certainly won't be up tomorrow because I'm on the road by 4 o'clock in the morning. But it'll be up probably on Wednesday. So just pop in, and if you want to do it, complete it, or use a phone in the next 30 seconds on the QR code there and scan it and get yourself in, and you can do it later on or do it while I'm talking, whatever you want to do. I don't believe in forcing people to do these things, so it's entirely at your discretion whether you want to do it or not. I recommend it. It does give out some very valuable information for the college, but it's up to yourself. Okay, let's move on. The second assignment is the final part of this module. And the first assignment, which caused a lot of confusion, because I think people were expecting something slightly different. The first assignment is very much theoretical. It's very much a case of your understanding of the rationale around why you do what you do and why the processes are there, and get under the skin of the actual legality of the process a little bit, and give me show me what you understand of that, the rationale why you do something. Think of me at that situation as the annoying child who constantly goes, but why? One of those children who just doesn't take an answer as the answer, that they like to question and try to get the understanding of it. So they just keep asking, but why? You can't do that, but why? And see what how people explain, and the more you explain it, the more they ask, but why? Before it just gets to a case of because I said so, and that's the end of it. So that was the first one. This second one, for those of you who are looking for something more practical, the second one will be right up your street. Because what I want you to actually do is go to the right page, Dennis, is to complete a report, an assessment, a full hazard analysis or risk analysis assessment. It's worth 60%, and it's about 2,500 words. And it's due on the 24th of April. So now you can submit before that. The system is live. Generally, I actually haven't checked it. Generally, I make the system live from the time this lecture starts, the lecture I hand out the assignment. So let me just a second, I'll bring it up on one of the screens here and just see. Yeah, it is live at the moment. Yeah, thanks, Eleanor. It is now live now. It's live since 7 o'clock, basically. I generally try to make it live on the actual at the time the class starts, so that it's available for people who want to go check it out. So it's there for you now, and the two drafts, the draft and final submission documents or elements are there as well for you, all ready to go. So it's about 2,500 words, plus or minus 10%. It's due on the 24th of April. 23:59 is my standard close-off time. You can submit at any time from now until then. So it's just be careful. What is it? A lot of words, a lot of text in this, so I'm just going to run through it fairly quickly and talk it through. If you have any questions along the way, throw them in the box and we'll get them answered for you. Otherwise, what we'll do is next week, have you had a chance to think about it, we'll start the class and I'll just basically ask, has anybody any questions? We can just make sure that for a week or so people have a chance to chuck out any questions when they think about this assignment, and then you're on your own from there. So first thing you do is pick an organization or business and complete a thorough hazard analysis of some aspect of the business. So it's not the whole business. Pick an area, pick a department, pick a function, pick something, and do a hazard analysis. The output from the assignment is your written report relating to the workplace, the problem within the workplace, analyze and measure the hazards involved in that area. You're free to specify the rationale, the hazards, etc. involved, which must clearly state the background, the reason, and the rationale for your assumptions. So you can do it on whatever you like, as long as you back it up and explain it. I'll run through these fairly quickly now, we can come back to them if we need to. There's a lot in this. So doing the assignment, select an organization. So preferably someone, maybe your own company, or a company you have worked with, or a company with whom you've got good knowledge. Oh, you can, yeah, you don't have to name the company. You can call it Company X, you can call it 123 Limited, ABC Limited. You can call it whatever you like. Yeah, you don't have to name the company. The recommendation here is if you can make it real, make it real. Some people do this, and that's why I give this provision in here to allow people to make it as real as they want. I'm talking here in this part of it as if people they can use their company, or they know their own department, their own function, or within the company, a specific thing they want to talk about. Fine, go with that. If you don't want to name the company, make up a name. If you do want to name the company, name them. I'm not going to be checking up the company. I'm not going to be checking the reality of the company. And I can assure you, I have neither the time nor the interest to, and that sounds wrong, but to pick up the phone, to contact the company, to ask them if what you say in your assignment is what actually happens. And just on that point, it's the thing that scares people that, if I name the company, they might get, if someone contacts them to check, somebody might ring the company to find out, is that what actually happens, or to double check either the problem or the process. Under basic GDPR rules, that's not feasible. Even before GDPR ever came in here, that's not feasible, because one of the best gatekeepers in any organization is reception or switchboard, whichever answers phones. And I can tell you, having been on both sides of the fence, as in being on the inside of a company where reception are funneling calls through to me, and being outside a company trying to get through a switchboard, they are very good at their jobs. They do not let anything, or very, very little gets through that they don't want to get through. So they're not going to take a call from some guy they never heard of from an organization called SETU to answer questions about a hazard or a risk assessment. So you can pretty much put in what you. That's why I say you need to justify your assumptions and your rationale so that it makes sense. If you are using a company, and it's just good practice and it's ethical behavior to contact them and let them know. Talk to your supervisor, talk to your manager, talk to somebody, and just say, look, is it okay if I do this? You may need to talk to some key people within the company. So, especially if you're coming from outside, if it's a company you've used in the past, just to make sure that they're happy for you to talk to their people about it. For the record, for anybody who wants to use their own company and wants to talk to their bosses about it, managers, bosses, supervisors, whoever about it, the only people who will read the submission that you're going to make will be me and possibly an external examiner. Nobody else will be reviewing this work. There was a time when you would have to submit this in hard copy format, and that is a bigger risk, because when you submit in a hard copy format, there's a hard copy document floating around the college. These are all soft copy. They're submitted to turn it in. The only person who's actually going to read it is me. I think there's over 30 people in this class, in this group. I can assure you that the external examiner will not. I will have to read all of them to grade them. I can assure you not all of these documents will be read by an external examiner. What they tend to do is take a sample of a high scoring, mid scoring, and low scoring paper, and they review those. So if we've got 30 people in the class, which I think we have a little bit more than that, but if we had said just rounded to 30 people, they might take maybe 6 papers. Too high, too medium, too low. They might actually take one of each, high, medium, mid, and low. And when they do read through it, they're not reading it for the information in it. They're reading it to see do the marks that have been allocated reflect what's in the paper? Or are the marks overly generous or overly restrictive? It's more to look at the way the marks were allocated, or to look at the fact that, okay, well, they wrote this and that's the mark they got. Was that mark justified? Was that mark realistic to the what has been read? It's rather than how did they make that leap of faith? How do they understand that that statement or that process or that regulation or whatever? So it's less to do with the content and more to do with, I suppose, checking the marks to make sure they're realistic. This is what an external examiner will be looking at. Actually, Margaret, we never hear. What we get told, we put in a mark, we put it on the system. There's a process involved in the whole marking system. It goes far beyond what happens on Turnitin. You're all submitting your first papers at the moment, and they'll be graded in the coming weeks when time allows me to do them. And what happens is whatever marks are awarded now are provisional, and that's what sits on the system. That's the provisional grade. It is not a final grade. Once those marks are put on the system, they're also added to an internal grading system. And every college has a double system. We have Blackboard and a system called Web for Faculty, WFF. Griffith College has Moodle, and it's got Themis, which is their version of the Web for Faculty. They stay on the system. That's what gets recorded, and that's what goes before the exam boards. There's two exam boards. There's the internal exam board, which will happen normally. Lifelong Learning actually runs two sets of internal exam boards. They'll run one probably in early to mid-May, and then there'll be a second one run in early June, depending on when classes finish and what way exams and things run. Last year we had a batch went in early May, and then the balance went in the first week of June. And what happens basically is in the internal exam boards, every student's grade is just reviewed. And when I say reviewed, lecturers are supposed to turn up to these exam boards. Last number of years, obviously with COVID, they've been online, which is for me much handier. You log in, they literally call out every student. You get to see all the grades for every student up on the screen, and all you're doing is validating that your grade is exactly the grade that you allocated. That's the internal exam board. So make sure that it's been transcribed correctly, it's in the right place, it's for the right module, all that's okay. Where the discussion evolves in those boards is if a student is within 1% of the next higher grade, the next level up. So the example I generally use, if they've got 69%, 70% is a first class honor. So they're on 69. Well, then what they will have worked out before the board meeting, internal board meeting, is how many extra marks does the student need to bring them to the 70, to bring them up to the first class. And then they will look at which module gave them the lowest mark. That lecturer will then be asked, look, we need an extra 10 marks. Can you give that student another 10 marks? Are you happy for that student to get another 10 marks? And that brings them up then to a first class honor. I've seen situations, most cases, the lecturer will go, yeah, fine, whatever, that's okay, go ahead. The grade gets changed. So this means that the grade that's on the system, Margaret, is now changed. It doesn't change on Blackboard, it changes across everything else. Nobody changed it in Blackboard. your grade on Blackboard is just provisional. But it gets changed on the main system. Well, it's the thing. It can go up. Yeah, I very rarely hear of it going down. Now, bear in mind, I'm still only on the first exam meeting. I've also seen a situation, taken back to Garrett's point a little bit, with that halo. I've also seen the situation. Just give me the inside track here, so how this works in these exam boards. Where, and I'm going to put myself in the supposing I'm here and there's a question mark over one of you saying, okay, look, they need an extra 10 marks to get them to a certain level. I had it last year actually on a different module with a student, and I had my records in front of me at the exam board. And when they said, okay, look, Dennis, this person got the lowest score on your module, can you give them an extra 10 marks? Or 15 marks or whatever they needed to get up to, if it's 69 and they're going up to 70, it's not you need another 1 mark. That's another 1%, which might be 10 marks. They'd have worked that out. So I looked at my records and I went back and said, no, sorry. I'm not happy to give them another 10 marks. Okay, can you tell us why? Well, yeah. The student didn't do the exam. The student only submitted one of the 2 assignments that was due. So no, I can't find any way of giving that person an extra 10 marks. They already got the marks they got for the first assignment, and then I've got 2 zeros. Or I've got I'd once one student only submitted 2 out of 3 assignments, and I wasn't going to give an extra. One of those assignments basically was a 0%. If they'd submitted it, they could have got 10 marks for it. If they submitted a piece of paper with their name on it, they'd probably have got the 10 marks for it. But they didn't submit it, so I can't honestly just throw 10 marks on the other questions when they didn't give me what was required in the exam or for the assessments. And the college will say, that's fine. The exam board will say, that's fine. Okay, no problem. Good reason. They're not getting the 10 marks off us. They might decide to give the 10 marks on someone else. They might decide that, okay, we still want to give those 10 marks, so let's give them to somebody else. Or they might decide to override the lecturer and say, we're going to give the marks anyway. A number of years ago, an undergrad student, I told her not to submit her dissertation. It wasn't ready. She submitted. She ignored me. And next thing, because my wife was in the same course as hers, my wife said that she'd been up and she'd been boasting a little bit. It wasn't delighted with life, celebrating on their class WhatsApp group that she passed her dissertation, and struck me, hang on a second, I didn't pass her. So I went back to the faculty and I said, what's going on? They said, oh yeah, the exam board, the decision was taken to pass her. I could make that exam board. So they made a decision to pass her because of her other grades. So there's a lot of decisions go on behind the scenes. Just because the grade you got in provisional grade may not be what you were hoping to get, there is an opportunity that it will get pulled up. That's just the first step. While that's going on, the external examiner is reviewing papers, reviewing grades. If your paper happens to be the one they pick up, they may come back and say that was marked very harshly. That paper deserves a better mark. I've never heard of one going down, but they can get marked higher. That's not to say they can't go down, but I've never heard of anybody coming back saying, hang on a second, this is what was up on Blackboard and the mark I actually received for the module is lower. What went on here? So I'm assuming if it could go lower, unless it's dramatically different, they tend to leave it stand. But if it goes higher, they'll give it the higher mark. That's my view on it, and this is recorded, so that's why I'm saying that. It's my view of what happens. Maybe I'm completely wrong with that. And this is the first year as a university. I don't know, have the rules changed? So basically, the mark you'll get on the system is a provisional grade until you get the piece of paper in June that says, here's your grades for the year. Here's your final grades. Once you get the final grades, they're the grades that have been agreed through internal and external exam boards. They're the ones that have been signed off Pending an appeal, they're the grades that go before the academic council, and then once the academic for ratification, and once the academic council ratifies them, they go before the governing body to be signed and formalized. So there's a whole tiered process here. So by the time they get to final, everybody has signed off on them. I've been on the academic council, so I've been on that side of the fence as well. I've seen how that side works. In the event of if you for example, when I grade your first paper here, if you're not happy with the results, I'm telling you right now, don't bother contacting me to see what I can do to change them. I can't. They're in the system. I can't touch them once they're in the system. I will tell you all the same thing if you come and try and tell me to and ask me to do anything with them. I can't. Once a grade is on the system, it's on the system. The only thing that can be done is you can appeal it. You won't be allowed appeal it until after the exam boards have sent out the final results, because that's where your result is finalized. If the exam board decides to elevate your grades, if the external examiner decides your grades need to be elevated, that's where all that happens. And until that's all been smoothed out and then you get the results, that's when you can say, oh no, I wasn't happy with that result, I want to appeal it. And you're free to appeal it. I mean, there's nothing to stop you appealing it. Your lecturer does not get informed that you are appealing. Because it's between the college, you, and an independent examiner. They'll give the paper to somebody else, and they'll say, "Now you take a read of it and you grade it and tell us what you think." And I will tell you that's a dangerous one. I've been asked to be a second examiner on a number of papers over the years, and I think by and large the paper I've graded was graded worse than it had originally been graded. In other words, the original grading was generous as far as I was concerned. And that's not because I was trying to be mean or anything. It's just my view of how the paper was at the end. I think in the college perspective, if the second examiner comes back, if another appeal examiner comes back and grades worse than the original grade was, then the communication back to the student is, we sent it to be reviewed. We sent it to have another examiner look at it. They looked at it blindly, so we don't have any of the history. And they would have graded it at this level, which is worse than what you actually got. So recommendation then is to take what you've been given, basically. They don't drop the score because you've decided to risk it all against an appeal situation. I think they leave it as it is. Or they recommend you they leave it as it is. But let you know that in actual fact, if they were to go ahead with it, then the grade will go down, not up. I've seen people appeal, or I've been on the other side of where people appealing, but I've never heard of a person's mark going down. They can go up, but they don't go down. That's the way it used to be anyway. So there's a whole process in place here. The point I was making at the very start of this is, if you're, nervous about who's going to see this and putting personal company information on the situation, realistically, I'm the only person who's going to be paying attention to what you're writing, and I'm looking at it from the perspective of making sense, flowing, referenced, applied, all the stuff that we talk about. I'm not sitting down going, oh, that's how that company does this, and making loads of notes and stuff like that about stuff. I don't download the papers. I review them on the system, on Turnitin. And once I'm finished, that's it. The results get upgraded into the system. Job done. I have too many students to grade. I have too many things to be doing. I don't have time to sit down and be actively studying and recording everything that's happening. So I can assure you, I'm not making mental notes about these things. Every year, Probably end of August, early September, the Turnitin system, the Blackboard system, does a rollover. And the rollover basically means that the system erases. So your assignments are gone. They disappear off the system. So, it's not going to be sitting in a library. It's not going to be sitting in somebody's office like the old hard copies used to be. It missed the shredding. It's, there's nothing there to shred. It's on the system. The system gets deleted. It's purged every August, September. After the second round of exam boards at the end of August, start of September, that's it. The only thing that gets left open in your final results in June will be your dissertation will be recorded as deferred. And that can scare people because they kind of say, "What the heck is the deferred? I'm working on my dissertation. Why are they deferring it for me? I didn't ask them to defer it." It's just a term they use. They officially class it as deferred because you are submitting it in August or end of July. Sorry, you're submitting at the end of July, so it goes into the August exam boards. So it's just a terminology they use as kind of an excused. You're excused from the June exam boards for that paper. You're excused on the basis it's deferred to the next exam board. So don't panic if you see that in your results in June. So basically, you can anonymize your company. But what I generally recommend to people, I try to make these assignments as realistic as possible for people. Those people who work in the industry or work in this area, work in risk assessments, health and safety, that sort of stuff, this should be right up your street, and it should be something you should be able to pretty much do in your sleep. The challenge is make sure you bring it in the academic world, and I'll talk about that in a little while. For those of you who are hoping to get into the health and safety environment or hope to get into the risk assessor or that sort of an environment, well, here's a bit of practice. Here's something that you can go and you can try and do a bit of practice on and see how you get on with it. So try to make it as real as I possibly can for people, to allow people to actually roll their sleeves up and get stuck in. The last paper was all about theory. This paper is about the theory, but it's applying the theory. It's the practical application stuff. So you may want to talk to people within your organization to get a handle as to what they do and why they do it. You may want to get permission from your company. Fine. If that's what you want to do, then go do it. If that's what you need to do, then go do it. Do whatever you need to do to do this correctly. The point that the thing you do here is identify a specific, a possible problem that you need to analyze. Examples that have been around for the last while, things like COVID-19 in the workplace, so changes in work practices, the risks associated with that, the energy crisis, or any other type of risk you can identify. It doesn't matter what it is. A risk to the business. That's what you're looking for. It doesn't always have to be of the building collapsing. It can be supply issues. It can be COVID. It can be whatever. It doesn't matter. Something relevant to your industry or your company or your experience. So within that, once you've identified the problem, you identify the risks, the ones associated for that specific problem. Yeah, that could be one. You could have one, Louise, like working from heights without proper certification, or working from heights with non-compliant scaffolding. People taking risks to work from heights when they're just literally climbing up the side of a building rather than actually putting in the proper health and safety features. Or allowing people who don't have safe pass on sites. So yeah, that would be perfect, Louise. That concept would be great. So start looking once you've identified the problem, like working from heights. Start looking at the type of risks that are associated with that problem. So we're going to look at another couple of tools tonight, just to kind of give the last, and we gave some already, but let's just give you another couple. And that one on the health system, the NHS had a number of them in there too. So whichever ones you want to use, work away. Whichever, if you're comfortable one already, now we haven't mentioned, as long as it's a recognized assessment tool, go use it. Get as many risks as you possibly can. Assess the risk exposure for each risk you've identified. So basically what you're doing, you're going to walk through the whole process. Pick the issue, identify the risks, assess the risks, then draw up a management plan for your top 10 risks, the top 10 you've identified. So your red scoring risks, maybe red into amber scoring risks, your green risks are minor, forget about them, but the top 10 red into amber risks will be the ones to go for. And for each one of them, you write a brief strategy, which will include things like steps you'll take to mitigate the risk, indicators you can monitor, give you clear early warnings, such as pick it up quickly before it becomes an issue. Recovery plan that can be put into place if things go wrong. And then you write a report describing your chosen organization, the problem, and the results of your risk assessment. So imagine I'm the CEO. I've replaced your current CEO. And I've come to you and asked you to conduct you pick the topic. So we'll say, Louise, if I can use yours as an example there, working from heights. I was coming into work this morning. I parked my car in the car park, and as I'm walking across into the building or onto the site, I looked up, and there's a guy leaning out over the edge of the scaffolding, 4 floors up, and he's reaching out around the edge of the scaffolding, trying to connect up some high voltage wires. He's stretching to do it, and he's clearly reaching out beyond the edge of the scaffolding. Completely unsafe practice. And I'm after seeing this guy do that stuff, and he's no hard hat on, no harness, that I could see 4 floors down, and just total rubbish. Totally carelessness, or total carelessness. And I've come to you, and I've said, right, there's a guy out there. Come here a second. Come out here with me for a second. Look up. Look at this guy. I want a full risk assessment for all the people working from height. And I want you to write a report on it and give it to me, please, on what's going on here, what needs to happen. And off you go. There's your document. Go write it up. Go investigate it and write it up. What should happen, what is happening, what must happen in future. So that you're going to come to me and you're going to basically bring my blood pressure back down to normal levels by saying, okay, well, yes, that's a problem. And we're now retraining everybody, and anybody who does not have the harness, that guy doesn't have a harness. So anybody from now on who doesn't have a harness, who's working at heights, is going to be sent home. And it's got to be the regulation harness and blah, blah, blah. They will be sent home. Boom, boom. That's it. Bye, bye. See ya. So that sort of situation what I'm looking for. Make it as real as you possibly can for yourself. Maybe you already experienced something like this. Maybe you have experienced a process where something has been dramatically wrong, or a major risk was found. Could be to do with supply, could be to do with operations, could be to do with health and safety, could be whatever. Doesn't matter. What is the risk, and what did you do about it? As I say, make it as real as you possibly can, because the more real you make it, the easier it'll be to do it. Now, there's one thing. Writing a report like this is not just a case of, well, there's the case, there's what happens, here's what should happen, here's what will happen in future, job done. It's a formal document. So I expect materials. You've done the work in the previous assignment on the rationale behind the legislation, behind the steps, behind the processes. Pull some of that into, if you need to, into this assignment. So what are the rules? What are the regulations? What are the referencing your materials that have to be pulled in here in accordance with the Health and Safety and Welfare of Work Act 2005, blah, blah, blah. Employers' duties are this. Employees' duties are that. You're still expected to bring in references because you're making a formal document. There's got to be the legal side of the fence to prove the fact. And any sort of a proper risk assessment document will cite legislation, it'll cite previous writings, it'll cite previous court cases, it'll cite anything it needs to cite to prove the point. You're not just writing an assignment for the college here. You're writing, I try to get people to think this in a different way. The assignment for the college is an easy mark if you do it right. This is where you're going to step up and you're going to say, right, now we're doing this to actually prove our ability to show the understanding and to treat it as a real item. Treat it as a real situation, a real scenario that you're now going to have to step up and you have to write this report. And on the basis of the report you write, management will be changing processes, but you will have recommendations in there to mitigate the risk. You will have the recovery plan in there in the case of the doomsday scenario. How do we get out of this mess? If everything implodes tomorrow, what do we do to survive? And people will look to you to not just talk about the problem, but to have the solution. So in the event of it all going pear-shaped, there's a document, there's a report. There's a report we can pull together, we can open, which will tell us what we need to do next. It's like the pilot on an aircraft having the checklist when something's going wrong. They have a checklist of what they need to do. So you're going to end up, that's going to be the output of this document, is going to be that checklist. You can feel free to use tables, use graphs, use charts, use whatever type of stuff you need to actually help your work. But what you're sending in is going to be an absolute formal report. Okay. So one of the people, if you're not getting into this game and you haven't done much in the line of risk assessments or health and safety or that sort of stuff within your company, well, then maybe one of the tasks you might do to start with is see if your company has any health and safety reports that you can borrow. You can not necessarily to do with the company, but to do with industry, maybe with your industry, you can have a read through and just give you an idea of how it's approached and what needs to be done. And then you can use it as a template, as a guide as to what the approach you need to take to conduct a similar assessment. I think it is possible. I think for the majority of the business world, they really couldn't care less. That sounds rotten for the person who falls. I think there would be locally within the company, there would be a lot of a knock-on effect, I suppose, for the company on the basis of the fact that somebody lost their lives in an industrial accident. I think customers, it will have a local impact on customers who may like that. They may not want to do business with a company who seems to be careless. And it doesn't matter if it's a case that the actual person who fell was 100% culpable for their fall, that they just refused to obey. They were sort of up on the top of a scaffolding in flip flops instead of work boots. They had no harness, they had no helmet. It was a hot day. They broke every rule that exists, including the common sense ones. And they wanted to they were working at height and decided to stand on the guardrail around the scaffolding to try and finish painting because they didn't want to go through the whole thing of a harness and additional scaffolding to get them up that last couple of feet to do the top piece. And having done that, they slipped and fell. Then even if that's the person, if it's the victim's fault, it's still going to come back to the company for not enforcing things properly, not having proper supervision or something there. That could have a short-term impact. I don't think it would have a huge impact on the company. It depends on the nature of it. I mean, Apple and other manufacturers, Apple in particular, got picked on in a number of years ago. They were dealing with a tech company in China called Foxconn. Foxconn still exists. Apple got targeted because Apple's a global brand and everybody knows Apple, and they were the biggest customer the company had. But companies like Walmart and Samsung and Sony and all these other companies were buying from Foxconn as well. They were getting products from Foxconn as well, but Apple was the one that media harped on. And okay, so what happened in Foxconn that was so health and safety bad? They were putting people under such pressure to get jobs done, these big companies. The netting was actually there, Garrett, as a result of what was happening. The pressures that the company was under. They were under serious pressure. The workers were under serious pressure. Workers didn't go home, they slept in the factory. And the pressure got so much that during, we'll say, lunch breaks, some of the workers would be known to go to the roof of this big building and jump off it. Just couldn't take the pressure anymore. The solution was for the company to put netting around the top floor of the building, so that if anybody did jump, they'd only fall the floor and they'd be into a net. They could be rescued. It's kind of a sad situation to know that's the only solution they can come up with. That doesn't imply that they change their work practices. It just implies that you're not jumping off our building, messing our car park up. Go jump off another building, type of thing. So in that situation, I mean, Apple still exists, Walmart still exists, Samsung still exists. They're all going fine. Foxconn didn't lose the contracts; they kept all those contracts. So, it depends on the nature of the situation. It depends on the publicity. It depends on a lot of issues, Louise, as to whether companies will lose contracts or not. I think for smaller companies locally, it would have a bigger issue than, in some cases, these big multinationals. Oh, it's a great control measure, Mike, but I would question if Foxconn was of the kind that they need to put netting up to stop people jumping off buildings. They're already known in that situation for driving workers hard, probably not paying a very good rate, to say that workers couldn't go anywhere else. I wonder the quality of the netting. If you cut corners in what you're paying your staff, would you cut corners in the quality of your safety features? They certainly didn't have any mental health supports in there, so one wonders if the conditions were that bad. What sort of netting were they putting up? Maybe putting wire netting up so if you jumped on it, it sliced and diced you before you hit the ground. There was another one came to my head there a second ago of a similar situation. I can't Primark regularly get themselves pulled up on these sort of situations. I mean, they're using factories in around the world which are known sweatshops or which are using child labor, things like that, which to us in the Western world is abhorrent. We hate the idea, and it's disgusting, and it's inhumane, and it's everything. And then we still go out and go into Penny. There's still see queues around the block when Penny's opened up after COVID. Oh, yeah, we still go to Penny's. Sue, go ahead. I'm hoping, Sue, you're not a product manager from Penny's. Your microphone is off, Sue. All right, don't
Sorry, me. Hello.
Hello, Sue. Yes, I can hear you.
Hey, hi. No, I've nothing to do with pennies. No.
Well, it's just the way the hand shot up there when I started talking about pennies.
Oh, I hit it by mistake. Sorry.
All right, no problem. No problem. But yeah, we still go there. That answers the question I have from Louise. Things that we know they're doing bad. We know their health and safety is not great. Does it have any effect on? Has Penny's lost contracts? No, they haven't. There are situations where it would have an impact. I remember actually going the last couple of weeks. Right next door to me, there's a laneway. It's owned by Greencore. It was an access lane to the fields behind the sugar factory when it existed. And there's a house. I'm on one side of the lane. There's another little house on the other side of the lane. And a guy's after buying the house on the far side of the lane. And we came up one morning. We woke up one morning in September, October, and he had people going berserk on the trees that are on my boundary line, and he decimated them. He had them just literally cut to shreds, including the previous owner of the house had beautiful fruit orchards, and he just leveled them, chainsawed the whole lot of them, took them all out. And one day, a couple of weeks ago, I heard noise when I went out to look. There's a digger back out in the lane, and they're clearing the brush and the rubbish, and they're getting ready to level it and do whatever, all sorts of things. So I went out and I basically asked what they were doing, and they were telling me, and I said, that this lane is actually not part of that property. It's owned by Greencore, and they won't sell it. It's still an access route for them. And the two guys doing the digger work kind of said, well, we're just going to get ready to put a wall in here. And I said, well, that's fine, but there is actually an injunction. I'd heard subsequently that there's actually an injunction against this guy. I never saw two guys stop work and move so fast to get out of there. They didn't want to be associated with anything that could cause them work in the future because they were working on something that was questionable. And they've been back in the last number of weeks doing other parts of that same garden, but they're not touching anything to do with the lane, where the lane is. In fact, while I was talking to these guys, there was a guy walked into the grounds, which I found strange. He just walked onto the property, and it turns out he's from Greencore. And he was on about he thankfully backed up everything I had said, and he said that lane is belonged to Greencore. You can't do anything with it. The builder had just decided he bought the house, so he was taking over the lane as well. It's a hostile takeover. Who's going to know? We didn't have to call anybody. This guy was passing. He saw the digger and came in. So yeah, locally it can lose your work if you step on the wrong toes. But globally, big businesses, I mean, there's been several incidents where things have gone wrong. It hasn't affected companies. You have Bhopal. I can't remember which pharma company it was. Something like Johnson and Johnson or Pfizer's or one of the big companies. They released toxic fumes into the locality out in India, and thousands of people. Ewing Carbide, thanks, Mark. Lots of people died and were dying for many years after. I presume they're still dying from this. Didn't have any major impact on the manufacturers. They still produce. It might have affected locally, but it's not affecting globally. Yeah, there's thousands of people I think killed in this. This was a major catastrophe, and it was a big one. It went on for decades after, and still, I presume it's still going on. There's still people with the ill effects of the process. And I know there was big settlements or there were, I won't say big settlements, there were settlements. It's never close to what they should be, but there were settlements. But company's still there. Company's still, are they probably bought over by somebody? There was the usual acquisition stuff that goes on. It didn't shut them down to my knowledge, apart from that factory. Probably caused a few heads to roll. The reality of business in this situation is that when something goes wrong, you may lose a few heads. Oh yeah, well, once they should do it once, do it a second time. Why not? Johnson Johnson, another company who likes to make it a habit of causing accidents or having accidents or incidents. What they'll tell you is it's nature of the beast. I mean, there's so much volume, so much product going through that mistakes will happen. I find it actually quite a sobering thought when we look at any sort of risk assessment or hazard analysis that, where's the threshold? Where's that line in the sand that to the left of it, we're okay. We're sailing close to the wind, but our risks are tolerable, are within tolerance. To the right of that line, we're in trouble. So that's the same as you're doing your risk assessment here. You're identifying, you're prioritizing the risks in this assignment. You're drawing the line. Where are the risks, the red ones or the orange ones that have to be dealt with, versus the orange into green ones that are kind of lesser. Well, they're risks, but they're minor. They're not going to be a big deal. We can let that ride. Unfortunately, when it comes to big business, a lot of businesses, it's only when something goes wrong that we actually start to step up and say, oh, heck, that was something we should have seen, or that was something we should have acted on. Look at the Airbus MAX 8. One falls out of the sky in Indonesia or somewhere, and it's the pilot fault. Pilots didn't understand. They weren't trained properly. Ding dongs didn't speak English properly. They didn't read the instructions. Second one falls out of the sky in Ethiopia or Ethiopian Airways or something, an African plane. Still a MAX 8, brand spanking new plane. Falls out of the sky. 339 people between the two planes dead. And Boeing still say there's no risk, there's no issue. Couple of their planes in America start to have a little bit of trouble then, but the pilots got them back on the ground safely. They weren't actually reported on because near misses kind of are bleh. Every day, as I have a tracker on my phone, and pretty much every single day I get a thing flags up on my phone of a plane somewhere in the world squawking. In other words, reacting to an emergency. That could be anything from a medical emergency to a mechanical issue. It's always some plane having an issue. So, what the heck? It's just one of those things. It's a machine. Things go wrong. It's only when the aviation industry, the aviation boards, the bodies controlling airspace stopped allowing MAX 8 aircraft to fly over or fly in their airspace that Boeing were forced to step back and say, oh, so we actually do have a problem here. And it ended up costing some serious jobs. I mean, the CEO, I think, had to fall on his sword for it, had to get out. And there was others had to go out. And then it opened up the can of worms where you had the people internally who were trying to report issues, safety issues in relation to the construction of the aircraft. but had been threatened that they would be fired if they blew the whistle on it, if they reported it. Just keep your mouth shut and get on with your job, type of thing. Did it affect the contracts? It did temporarily. But the biggest impact was the aircraft were grounded until the whole thing was resolved. And Ryanair at the time had one of the biggest contracts the manufacturer had ever seen from 737 aircraft. The biggest single order of 737 aircraft that they'd ever seen. And that got held up because most of them were MAX 8s. So they had to change the name of the plane and do a lot of other bits and pieces and obviously make it safe. And still today, I hear people saying that if they were flying somewhere and that they found out that they were going to be on a MAX 8, they'd cancel their plane ticket. Despite the fact it's probably the safest aircraft in the sky at the moment because everybody's watching it. So no, I know it's a long-winded answer, Louise, but I don't think it actually impacts businesses as much as people would like it to. That doesn't stop the businesses, or it doesn't stop the pressure on a business to actually manage the situation and make it work, make it right. So I hope you can see what this is all about. I mean, this document is about. It's a straightforward process. There's nothing difficult in this. A comfort break, yeah, no problem. Just let me get to the end of this piece, and then we'll take a break, Mike. Just so I can draw a line under this. What you're handing in for this report, I think this is the end of this bit of it, is it? Yeah, this is the last one of these. We'll take a break then, Mike. What you're sending in is a description of the organization. He got in before you, Margaret. That's the thing. A description of the organization, a description of the problem you're trying to analyze after, this one specific area you want to focus in on. Description of the approach you'd use to assess the project risk, the results of your risk assessment, and then a one-page summary sheet as well, just to demonstrate. Okay. It's the next paragraph is just a breakdown of the layout. So it's actually something it really annoys me in terms of submissions. Each time you're told the font size, the line spacing size, the whole presentation process. Times New Roman, font size 12, line spaced 1.5, and justified text. And the amount of times I come across people who fail to follow that simple instruction is crazy. If this was a tender document and you were asked to submit a document, you would be asked to submit it in a certain way. And if they opened your document and found it's font size Calibri 11 and it's line space 1 or 1.15, your document would end up in a bin. It wouldn't even be scored. Justified is where justified is where there's a straight line, a straight margin down both the left and right side. You have left aligned, which is you have a margin down the left hand side. You have center aligned, where everything lines up at the center of the page. You have right aligned, where the straight line is down the right hand side of the page. Or you have justified, where it's square down both sides. So, it's, yeah, if you hover over it, it'll tell you which it should be. It's from a report perspective, it's just a smarter approach. It's having everything justified. Same as your dissertations and whatever, to be expected to be justified as well. It just makes it a tidier document. It looks more professional. Right, folks, let's take a break and we'll run through the last bits fairly quickly because they're fairly straightforward things. So it's now 8:15. Back here for 8:30. and I'll have you out of here probably just after 9. So I'll talk to you at 8:30. Okay, folks, we'll get back into it. Apologies, I got caught up answering emails. Right, we'll move into this and get through the last. I want to finish off the tools and so on today. So let's blast through the remainder of this. Some of it might come in handy, especially for the second assignment, and if it doesn't, fine. If it does, fine. So we'll get cracking with it. So I want to start looking at some of the last tools. We've looked at things like FEMA and some other situations, the examples taken from the NHS presentation a few weeks ago. Tonight we're just going to look at the last couple of objects and then we'll finish. Pareto analysis is one, or as my daughter used to call it when she was younger, the potato analysis. It's also known as the ABC analysis. It's also known as the 80-20 rule. It's a very useful business one. Maybe not so much from a health and safety perspective, but it is a very useful business tool. And it can actually identify where do we put our focus. I've actually tried this theory, the Pareto theory, the 80-20 theory, across a number of different scenarios over the years when I was in gainful employment in organizations, and it actually scarily works very, very well. At least it did for me. What it says in terms of a project or in terms of a process or in terms of a risk assessment side situation is that 20% of sources cause 80% of the problems. So if you're looking at an organization, an operation, you're looking at this massive situation, this very complex operation going on, lots of parts making up the whole. And it can be daunting to know, where the heck do I start? Where do I look? What do I focus on in order to identify, to conduct my risk assessment or to check the hazards? Where am I? There's so much going on. What am I actually looking at? What am I looking for? And it is a slightly sobering thought to know that only 20% of what you're looking for, a fifth of what you're actually going to, you need to focus on, accounts for 80% of the issues. So all you've got to do is find that 20%. And that's one of the reasons it's so hard to spot them, because it's the smallest number. Because the numbers are 20, 30, 50. 20% is 80% of the problems. 30% is 15% of the problems. And 50% is 5% of the problems. Unfortunately, our judgment gets crowded by the 50%, which are all the menial things that have absolutely no major impact on anything. But there's 20% sitting in the middle of that. It's the where's Wally in the middle of the big pile that we've got to find. And it can sometimes be handy to be able to work out what they are. If I'm talking about to somebody about, managing warehouse, I've had people come to me and say, but sure, there's thousands of items in our warehouse. How the heck can we identify where we need to focus in order to manage the stock a bit better? Find out the volume. 20% of what's in the warehouse accounts for 80% of what you put through the warehouse. The volume that you put through. So find out the highest in terms of volume or value, and there's your 20%. So if we can identify that 20%, we can focus in on the things that cause the most issues. Yet it's the smallest number of items we have to look for. It's a starting point. Helps focus our efforts. On the other hand, if you want to come up with a theory, you want to come up with something that you want to test, then chances are you won't be allowed going near the 20% ones. because even though they may actually be the highest volume of product, they may be the highest value of product, they might actually be the mission critical products, and no manager is going to let you go nuts on one of those without the concept being proven. So your 50% that's worth 5% of the volume or 5% of the problem are your safe zone. It's the place where you can demonstrate the concept. And once you've proven the concept with those small, inverted commas, insignificant, close inverted commas, items, then you've proven the concept. Once you prove the concept, you can roll it out as into one of the bigger ones, to the bigger situation. In the Pareto analysis, the rules for doing it are quite straightforward. You decide what you want to know more about, what problem you want to know more about, what issue or risk, whatever. You can choose the causes, you can brainstorm with people to find out the cause of the issues, or you can use data that may exist. You may have had accident reports, you may have incident reports around the place that you can draw on. Choose some sort of a meaningful use. Yeah, it could. Yeah, there's a little bit of PC needs to come in here, Mike. Exactly. Yeah, that's getting a bit out of control at the moment. Some of that sort of that mind the language type is mind the way we phrase things. It's even getting into our nursery rhymes now, apparently, and lullabies. They want to change the wording on all those. But hey, the world has gone nuts. We're rewriting all the Roald Dahl stories as well, or they wanted to rewrite all the Roald Dahl stories. Yeah, identify as a flower pot. We're all right. Yeah. So once we've got our mind shower, brainstorm, or other collective gathering of information, we can choose the most meaningful unit of measurement. And that sometimes that's value, sometimes it's frequency. You know, how many couriers do we have to get because we have to start getting additional deliveries rushed in because we get it wrong. How much overtime are we paying for people to stay back and make up for errors that happened? Deadlines missed. Things that we want to meaningful measurement that everybody understands. And then go from there. The other thing we need is, and it comes with most of these situations, we need to have a period of time. We can't just leave it open-ended. So we've got to do it within the last month, within the last week, within the last 3 months or 6 months or a year. It's got to be within a fixed period of time. And then from there, we can take the relevant steps. Once we have identified those first points, we then gather the data we need. A list will cause the horizontal line, frequencies will cause a vertical line. So we can start to draw a graph. We can map the process, the visual. We create a visual of the difference between the cause and the frequency. And we can use a cumulative graph, a cumulative line showing total. So we can see, is it a growing? Cumulative will show us whether it's flat line, whether it's decreasing, or whether it's increasing. If it's output, for example, might show a decrease line, sloping downwards from left to right. If it's errors or accident rates, it might show sloping upwards from left to right, which means that our cumulative over a period of time is getting worse. We're increasing the number of accidents in a given period of time. We can compare it over different periods. We can look at this 3 months. We're now in March. So by the end of this month, we can look at January to March versus October to December last year, or versus January to March of last year. So we can compare the trend line in two different periods of time, or the same duration of time, or even the same period of time last year versus this year. So from a health and safety perspective, we can see how are we performing as a company. Are we improving? Have we learned anything from the last period of time? Have we carried anything forward from the last period of time? Are we still following? How many times were staff reprimanded for not being compliant with their safety gear? How many times did we have to write, just down basics, how many times do we have to write a report about somebody who wasn't following safety protocols, who wasn't wearing the right PPE? The first step in that is just the basics. Number. How many times? And is that improving or disimproving? Once we have that, we can dig behind it to find out, well, what is it about? Is there a specific, of all our staff, is there a specific category of staff who are not compliant all the time? In other words, are they contract workers who are coming in and don't have the gear they need to have, or don't have the qualifications they need to have? Or is it the company workers who just stopped following the rules? Is it just complacency slipping in? We haven't had an accident, so why should we worry about all this extra gear? There's various potentials, but starting by identifying and mapping, of finding that 20% is a key. Then from there, we can drill down a bit more. We can get under that skin, and we can see what else is there, what else we're trying to do. And it's the same thing in all sorts of business. I mean, you start with I always liken it within a business situation as the funnel. You start wide, you start broad, you start with the global picture. And then as you progress, you narrow it in, you zone it into a specific area of focus. And that's down through the funnel. Start wide and narrow it in as you go. But it's a flow. It starts broad as the global picture on something, the global situation on something. And global is a subjective word, because global from a company perspective can be literally the global market, global business, global trade, whatever you want to call it. It can just as easily be within the immediate confines of that company, that situation, that build, that whatever. That can be global. I mean, when I was in Kerry Foods, a global product launch was Ireland and England. Kerry is a global organization. Kerry Group's a global organization in the true sense of global. They have divisions all over the world. But for Kerry Foods, which no longer exists, for Kerry Foods, global was Ireland, England. We didn't have any other operations around the world. So it's a relative term. So the global, or the bigger picture, is that relative term, which we then funnel in to a specific issue, a specific thing that needs to be dealt with to get behind why the figures are the way they are. Probably the simplest tools we can use in risk assessment is a tool known as the 5 whys. it is the simplest tool and probably one of the most effective tools you can use in risk assessment. Something is a problem. Why? Because blah, blah, blah. But why? There's two whys that force you to dig deeper. I get an answer to that bit, but why? And it's Mike.
Where does this sit into a leading and lagging analysis system? This suggests to me it's lagging rather than leading. So you're not trying to avert, you're actually reacting to what's happened.
In your 5 whys, you are very much lagging. You're very much behind the process, yes. In your something like a Pareto analysis, you could use it to lead, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to find out first what are the biggest areas of concern in our business, and then we can go in and try and proactively manage a process before it becomes an issue. So yeah, it depends on, is it before or after the horse has left the stable? Are we trying to close the door? And yeah, it's the 5 whys is very much a lagging situation, but it's also a very quick way of you could have a situation where we need to, you could you turn it into a lead? You could actually turn it into a leading as a, okay, we need to look at, I'll go back to Louise's idea from earlier in the session. We need to look at the compliance of people working at height in this operation. Why? Well, because working from a height to greater exposure to whatever, and you could ask the whys in advance of something happening as to why you need to focus on, why it needs to be looked at and reinforced, or to review the current structure and standards and rules to make sure that they're still up to speed, up to spec, and still relevant to the process. You could turn it around into that, but you still have to, for each of them, you have to come up with what you want to investigate in advance of something actually happening. Leading only works if you are proactively looking at and thinking about what could go wrong, and then picking a way of analyzing it, investigating it before anything does go wrong. That can be one of the biggest issues people have in any sort of risk or hazard analysis, in that a person who is conducting these preemptive assessments, that's why I know of somebody in health and safety who worked in health and safety who was basically known as the Grim Reaper, because they were seen as the person just looking for problems where nobody else saw a problem. The mindset's slightly different. You're looking to see if you can find something that needs to be prevented before it becomes an issue. I mean, if you take a look at it, I was in St. Luke's Hospital today, and very well organized, very well structured, very, very thoughtful in terms of how they keep the place sorted and clean and everything organized. And they are on record. They are almost a center of excellence, or seen unofficially as a center of excellence of hospitals in the country because of the way they do things. And they were doing it long before COVID became an issue. They're a hospital that rarely ends up in the news for trolleys or for anything else. As I say, I was walking through it today. I was down for a couple of tests, and I didn't see a single patient. I saw trolleys in the car, empty beds or trolleys in the corridors, but they weren't set up for patients. They were just being stored out of the way. Nobody. I don't think, actually, now that I think of it, I didn't even see patients walking around in dressing gowns, which is something you'd normally see in a hospital. Maybe they don't have any more patients. Maybe they got rid of them all. But they basically preempted a lot of stuff. They basically looked at the whys before it became a why. They started identifying, we need to look at this area. Well, why? Because they're justifying their rationale behind why they need to do their risk assessments and make changes to the processes, which seems to be working very well. It certainly was quite a controlled and quite a safe feeling environment there today when I was down there, because they preempted. they lead rather than lag, which is encouraging for once. Pareto, any of these can be used in advance or behind. The Pareto, to me, is better used as a leading situation because, but for that to happen, you need to identify something that potentially could go wrong and then focus in on that. The same as what you're going to be doing for the assignment. You're picking something that could go wrong, look as a lead, and how would you conduct the assessment to do that? And then what sort of hazards and risks can impact that? And then go from there. How would you address those risks if they did happen? And on we go, rather than this has happened and this is what we've done to fix it. Focus, and thanks for bringing it up, Mike. It's focus your assignment on leading the process rather than lagging the process. You're walking the door to conduct your analysis of the process, of a process, and these are things that can go wrong. This is the weighting of what's likely to go wrong, what's the biggest impacts, and then here's what we need to do to make sure that that doesn't happen or to manage it if it does happen. Not everything can be mitigated. Not everything can be eliminated. Some things we have to be able to put a plan A, B, and C in place just in case. We can't block everything from happening. Stuff will go wrong. Machines will break down. Something will catch fire. Something will short out. Something will not be supplied when it's needed. Something will happen. That's best will in the world. That's not the way it's going to pan out, but we have to allow for it. Sorry, Mike. Term is here again. You saw it in the FEMA situation and some of the other or FMEA situations, and we've seen it in some of the other tools that we explored in the past as well. Cross functionality is a great way of looking at hazard assessment or risk assessments. Getting input from multiple functions because people all see things in different ways. We look at our job, our roles, our environments in different ways. And it can be very hard to sometimes see the wood for the trees when you're stuck in the middle of something. That you don't see the perspective that other people might see. You don't think of something from a different viewpoint. And we all perceive things differently. So it's important, these brainstorming type of situations, these situations where we can get a group of people together who have experience and knowledge of the area we're focusing on. But they can equally come back and talk about, they're known as stakeholders. So they're people who have connection and involvement are a requirement within a given area. And we're getting them to come up with the potential issues, which means we're getting them to come up with the pain points for them, the things that are in their line of sight in a given situation. And people will look at things differently. Believe it or not, I used to get the 6:30 train to Dublin every morning when I was working in Dublin as a consultant. I used to call it the zombie train because anybody on the train that has 6:30 in the morning is a zombie. You get on, you sit in the same seat, and if there's somebody in the seat, these day tripper people in the same seat as you, even if it's an empty carriage, you're lost. You don't know where to sit. And you're out of sorts for the day. You're out of sorts for ages because your seat's not there. But I remember the trains the 6:30 train from Dublin, or from Carlow, is a ghost train. It used to come to Carlow as a ghost train, so it'd come to Carlow empty, and then it would start in Carlow at 6:30 in the morning and work back. She normally hits Carlow about 6 in the morning, and then head off to Dublin. And I used to get into Dublin normally around 7:45. It's scheduled time was closer to 8 o'clock. But it would normally be in Dublin somewhere between 20 to 8 and 8 o'clock. 20 to 8 and quarter to 8. And we loved it. Absolutely loved it, because you hit Dublin, and if you got it in there by just before quarter to, even though it dropped you off at platform 6, 7, or 8 in the station, which is the ones, as I used to say, halfway to Inchicore, furthest ones away from the front door, you could still make the Luas coming through or the bus there. You just about catch them all bang on time. Your connections are all there. If you came in after quarter to 8, you're stuck. You're going to be, by the time you get out the door, you're going to be waiting. And at that stage, there's another train after coming in from Galway or from Limerick or from Cork, and the platform for the Luas or the buses is just jointed with people. And I remember she started coming into the station. All of a sudden, she started coming into the station at closer to 5 to 8 than quarter to 8. And because I'd be in the station normally in Carlow, I'd be in the station sometimes before the train even gets into the station, 6 o'clock. I got to know the driver and have a chat with him when, on the turnover. And I said to him one day, I said, what's going on going into Houston? We noticed that you're running great on time, but as you come in, just into the entrance of the station, you stop. And you could be stopped there for 5 minutes before you actually bring her into the platform. Or you used to fly in from Adamstown. After Adamstown, you put the boot down and you absolutely floor it into Dublin. Then all of a sudden, you've stopped. What's going on? And the driver said, we were told to. There's a sign in the station put up in the driver's room that there were complaints from people that the train was arriving too early. Perspective. People gave out that the train arrived too early. They were coming out of the train, they were getting up the platform, and they had to stand and wait on the platform outside for the Luas. They had to wait too long for the Luas. Or they had to wait for the bus to turn up, so the trains had to arrive on time and not before. Having the brainstorming thing gets you into the atmosphere of what are other people's views. Maybe a problem isn't as big as we think it is. And maybe it's bigger. And it's getting that understanding and talking to people so that we understand is important. Keeping a relaxed, fact-finding situation to get the right people first. Who are the stakeholders? Who are the people who have an input on this? You may blame people working from a height. You may blame them for not having the right PPE equipment, the right harnesses and so on for working from height. And then when you go and talk to them about it, it turns out that's what they've been issued with by supplies. They go looking for a harness to work from height. They're handed a harness. As far as they're concerned, that's what they have to use, but it turns out that it's not the regulated harness. And that's because somebody actually went and bought the wrong thing or cut a cost. It's not the operator's perspective, not the operator's fault for turning up with the wrong harness. It's whoever supplied them with the harness went out first day and bought the wrong harnesses. So until we have these sort of events, these brainstorms, we don't know where the issue actually occurs and how big an issue it actually is. And that's what we have to be careful of. That's what these ideas will help us with. So what we try to do again is define the problem clearly. That's the key. Finding the specifics we want to look at, the laser focus that we're trying to look at. If we cast that net too broad, we're only scratching the surface. The mantra I heard used before, I use it for people doing dissertations, and I use it it's used in business as well. Inch wide, mile deep. Tiny area of one problem, one issue, and a mile deep. Deep dive on that. Really get into under the skin of that. Really go all the way through on that. The alternative is a mile wide and an inch deep. That basically is barely scratching the surface. That's not going to give you anything apart from ruffled up surface. So the idea is by having a very defined problem, defining the problem, defining it clearly, then we can start looking at all the ideas that can come out of this, the issues, the things we can try to sort out of this. Initially, same as any other form of risk assessment, there's no discussion or evaluation. It's just getting the ideas down. Everybody has an opportunity to contribute. Everybody has a viewpoint, and listening to the viewpoints. Some of them are valid and some of them are genuine. They will become part of the final list. Some of them are not. Write everything down. Let everybody share the idea so people can think about, oh yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. Let people have a think about it. Make sure that people understand what they are. So if there's clarification needed, get the clarification going. By getting the group consensus or the group ideals in there, we clarify what we're looking at. From a risk assessment perspective, that helps us to identify the ones that are discussed more, the ones that have interconnectivity across a number of people. So they're relevant to a number more than one person. That's going to be an indicator straight away. That leads us to an extension of brainstorming. That's called consensus reaching technique. And that's once we've done all the previous steps within brainstorming or even within the Pareto analysis, we can start to work out, get a consensus. What is the thing that we need to use? What is the area we need to focus in on? What is the best solution? And if we do this on a cross-functional basis, even though there's a person in charge of the health and safety, a person in charge of the risk management who's going to actually drive this, there is consensus from people to, yes, this is the thing we need to focus on. This is the order of all the lists we've had. This is the order in which it needs to be dealt with. So everybody gets their the issue sorted. People agree on what's the worst, the things that need the attention most, and then the rest just falls into place. So we get our ideas, our brainstorm, as I've said. We list and score them. Again, this is much the same as FMEA, as any of the others. They're all the same basic process. We're basically identifying, we're analyzing, we're scoring, and then we're selecting the top ones that we want to deal with. They're just different ways of doing the same thing. Let's face it, there isn't really any other way of doing this. We can use data as to what's happened before as a guide for ourselves, but realistically, we still have to measure, weight, and make a decision. Having a consensus situation, we have a group of people working on the process at the same time, which makes it a little bit, it's closer to objective without being objective. When it's subjective, you could very easily have personal biases, which can impact how things are viewed and or how the decisions are taken. If you have only one person doing a risk assessment, then the chances are it's going to become a lot more subjective. The chances are you're going to have somebody just doing what they like doing, what they're comfortable with, and maybe ignoring a task that needs to be dealt with but is considered too hard. So no, I'm not doing that. I'll do that next time. So nearly finished these. I just want to run through the last few. Actually, this is the last one. The cause and effect diagram. It can be very good if people are visual to be able to just kind of see how things fit together. I think we have a picture of it coming up. Sometimes this knows the fishbone diagram, and you'll see why in a few minutes. And you have to start the same as anything else. You have to start with the specific issue you want to review. That can be something that's already happened, and you're trying to work out how and why it happened, or which is your cause and effect, or it can be just to get clarity and understanding as to what could happen. It can still have a cause and effect. It may never have happened. It may help to drive across potential seriousness of a risk by applying a cause and effect. Yeah, it's quite similar to a decision tree, Mike. Yeah, you'll see the image now in a second, and you'll just see how close it can be. Just it runs the opposite direction, I think. The bigger the diagram, the better. Big flip chart pages, if possible, in landscape, so that you can spread it out. May take a few iterations to get it done right. Basically, what you're doing is it's doing this funnel system. It drills down on something. It's a bit of a combination between decision tree and a mind map to capture all of the elements of something, and then from there we can see, well, what of those do we need to actually really focus in on here. So I'm going to go straight to it. This is the end of the process. So that's just the process of how to use it. There we go. So we have here on the very right, we have, this is a simulated one on a product. So it's making and moving glass, crystal products. And the effect, the issue, is breakages. So you could say, what are the risks of these things breaking in transit? What's the risk of us having high breakage? And what are the contributors that can give us breakage? So Waterford Crystal is developing a brand new crystal bowl or crystal goblets, and they want to ship them all over the world. So what we have is, okay, we're going to shipping them all over the world. Now let's take what can go wrong? Let's conduct the hazard analysis or the risk assessment on breakages of crystal traveling around the world. Okay, so what are the contributors? Well, in this case, we've identified 4 contributors to what could cause the product to break in transit. The packaging, the transport, the manufacturing process for the glass itself, or the product itself. And we break down all of those levels. No problem, Stu. We're nearly finished anyway, so you can go back to the candles then. So once we have this started with the packaging, you can look at all the various things that can come in there. All the various things that can impact and cause a breakage. As you identify these issues, you can then see what are these things we can resolve. You have things like cartons, and in that case, you have on the right there, you have Smurfit. So we talk to maybe Smurfit to see can they do something better in terms of providing a box that's not going to break. No problem, David. Talk to you next week. We're nearly finished here anyway. You can look at stress test on the packaging. You can look at the position in the box, about inserts around the box to protect the product. So drop testing of the box to see how it goes. All of these areas, the packaging side of things get looked at. Then maybe we're looking at the transport. How is it being handled? As my father, who used to work in the post office, said, fragile means throw gently. We've also seen the videos on airports of people, the way they handle the baggage going on and off aircraft, with just throw things and drop big, massive suitcases on top of small carrier bags. It's the scare stories that we see, or they kick the bags across the ground or whatever. These are all things that we have to keep an eye on and just understand how things are moving and see is there something we can preempt. We can look at the product, the design of it. Is it designed for transport? I mean, there's some lovely, cocktail glasses or wine glasses with the very long, narrow stems on them, and in design they look fantastic, and when they're made and standing up there, they're beautiful. But those little narrow stems on the glasses, if they're traveling over a long distance, they're not going to survive the trip. So maybe the design needs to be looked at because the cost of packaging will improve, or will shoot through the roof. Maybe the glass isn't annealed properly, which means it's not reinforced through the second heating system, reheated and cooled in a certain way to actually strengthen the glass. The thing is that as part of a design, we can actually lead the risk assessment by saying, okay, so what's likely to happen? Well, this is glass. Glass can break. Right, so what are the potential cause and effects of the break? Effect, we know, it's break. So what are the causes of that, and work backwards? Again, these are one of these systems that don't need major software. They need a sheet of paper, a pen, and they need brainstorming. People to sit down from the different areas and talk it through. I mean, if I was involved in these, and I have been involved in things like this in the past, not for glass, but in things like this, and I would have been involved in 2 of those 4 areas. Product development would have been involved in the process and the product, because they designed the product, they designed the manufacturing process. I would have joined the party in terms of the packaging and the transport. To talk about understanding the transport side of things, the movement of the materials, and how that works with the packaging, or the packaging works with it. To then decide what's the best way of working around it. So try and find the problem first, and then how can we use any of these or other issues to fix it. Maybe it's getting into a situation, as some companies do, where you do a deal with someone like FedEx or DHL or UPS or somebody, who will you bring them in on board as both transport and packaging, and see if they can come up with some way that will guarantee the safe delivery of a product, but the prices will then be impacted by that. And folks, that's all I've got for you tonight. Thank you very much. I hope that the actual assignment is somewhat clear to you. I will raise it if I think of it start of next week, and just ask if everybody's okay with it. If there's any questions. So next week, if you have questions, bring them along with you. And other than that, have a great week. Stay safe over the next couple of days with the bad weather's forecast. And I shall talk to you next week. Have a good one.